Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a whole stack of stuff to talk about. What is this stack of stuff? Well, today we're going to be talking about the ideal piano trios, the medium. Now, this is a repertoire talk. I'm going to be showing you individual performances, which I think are very, very good. But these are not the necessarily like my favorites or howevers, or they're all just really good performances of the music in question. And there are lots and lots more for all of these pieces, because chamber music, particularly these days, is undergoing a renaissance on recordings. Not so much in concert, not so much in terms of what people really listen to. It's still something of an esoteric medium. But the fact of the matter is that because there has been such a proliferation of independent labels and fabulous small ensembles of every particular type, that you can get incredible chamber music performances just about anywhere. It's really hard to find bad ones. And today, I'm going to be talking to you about piano trios. Now, the piano trio, you might think, has been around forever. That is a keyboard plus a cello and a violin. That's the basic trio. There are other piano trio ensembles. There's some where there's a flute instead of a violin or something, some other exotic combination of instruments. There's, Mozart's Kegelstadt trio and Brahms's horn trio that use woodwind instruments of various kinds, or brass instruments or whatever. But we're talking about the standard piano trio. And the guy who really originated the classical piano trio was Mozart. Now, I know you're going to think I'm going to say Haydn, because Haydn's piano trios are extraordinary. They are exceptional. They are amazing. But they are not piano trios quite in the classical sense of the term. The classical piano trio, as regards all forms of chamber music, involves complete independence and necessity of the various parts. And that means that the violin and the cello and the piano are all equally significant, potentially. It doesn't mean that's the way it is necessarily in reality, but it means that the way that the composer writes for them is as independent participants. Haydn's piano trios are part of another sort of sidetrack in the history of the trio. They are accompanied sonatas for the most part. When you get to the very end of his career, the cello part starts to detach itself from the bass line of the piano. But for the most part, the cello doubles the bass line of the piano. That doesn't mean it's an ungrateful cello part. Actually, they're a lot more interesting, I'm told, than some of Mozart's cello parts. But the bottom line is that Haydn's trios, magnificent as they are, and I've been talking about some of them, and they will get all kinds of independent treatment, so don't fear. They are something different from the classical piano trio. The first guy who really investigated and realized the potential of the medium as a modern constituent ensemble of three independent voices participating in various combinations was Mozart. And Mozart wrote 6 fabulous piano trios. I mean, they're not well known. They're not as well known as his string quartets or his string quintets. And it's a terrible shame. And you remember he wrote 2 fabulous piano quartets. There's some other things. And the quintet for piano and winds. And there's a lot of really good Mozart. That incredible divertimento for string trio. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. So the piano trios are, one of them actually is a divertimento. It's Divertimento Kerschel 254. But the others are numbered: Kerschel 496, 502, 452, 442, 540. Let's start again. They are numbered 496, 502, 542, 548, and 564. And I have here a lovely recording on MD&G with Trio Parnassus of the Mozart Complete Piano Trios. They tend to come in a clump. You can usually get them in a set, 2 CD set, and they are extremely rewarding pieces, beautiful pieces. And like so many classical chamber works in the days before the modern piano came around, and piano writing was as big and dense as Beethoven made it, for example. These ensemble works are extremely rewarding in terms of listening to keyboard writing. I mean, they are much more interesting, for example, than Mozart's piano sonatas and his solo piano work, because he has more texture, more voices at his disposal, more combinations. You could do piano and violin, you could do piano and cello, you could do cello and violin versus the piano. You've got all these opportunities. And this sort of thing really encouraged Mozart to write more fully, I think, for the keyboard. Anyway, they're beautiful, beautiful works. And so the beginning of your ideal list of piano trios for your collection, you need to have Mozart's piano trios. So that was Mozart, and he's wonderful. So after Mozart, we get Beethoven. And of course, it was Beethoven who established the piano trio as a vital and vibrant chamber music medium for all time to come. Not that many composers took up the challenge. That's where things get interesting. But Beethoven wrote roughly 4 discs worth of piano trios. The most famous I have here. I have them all, of course, but I'm just sort of, tossing these around. Beethoven's trios, you have the Archduke, and there's another one with a name, the Ghost Trio, which is quite lovely, known for its entertainingly interesting and atmospheric slow movement. But the Archduke is the big one. It's his Opus 97. It's 40 minutes long. It's as long as any symphony. It's a big, beefy chamber work. And, one of the things that it's so important to remember when we listen to these works is that the fact that they are chamber works does not mean that they're small. They may be small in terms of performance forces, but they are just as large, formally speaking, in terms of their scope and ambition and expressive range and their length as any of the large orchestral works that Beethoven and his contemporaries were writing. I mean, they are just as large. We need to think in terms less of forces involved than of formal process. The shape of the work as a whole. The Archduke is just great. It begins with an absolutely gorgeous tune on the piano that I always used to confuse with a almost contemporary work. I mean, it was further down in the opus numbers, but it was pretty close. The Razumovsky String Quartet number 1. That one goes do 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 you do 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 pa 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 ba. Well, this one goes ya da 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 ya da 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 da. I mean, they're really, really close relatives, and so you can tell if you like juicy vintage middle period Beethoven, you're going to love the Archduke and the other piano trios from the same period. There are some earlier ones too. And then there are a whole bunch of variation sets and shorter pieces that Beethoven wrote for piano trio. He was the guy who put the piano trio medium on the map. This one, which is excellent, is with the Florestan trio on Hyperion. They've done all of them, and you might want to collect that set. It's first rate. Absolutely first rate. But again, I'm not really trying to hammer home performances as opposed to works. And then we can talk about specific works or specific interpretations, in later talks. I want to leave some room to revisit this because, I really have a concept here that I'm going to go through the different chamber music media and do ideal talks for each one. So at least you'll know what repertoire you should be looking for and how to put together a basic collection of, piano trios, violin sonatas, piano quartets, things like that, sextets, various quintets, ensembles of various types. I think it's fun to do, and I hope it conveys useful information. So Beethoven is your next guy in the ideal piano trio pantheon. After Beethoven comes Schubert. Schubert wrote 2 absolutely magnificent piano trios. There's one in B flat and there's one in E flat. The one in E flat is Deutsch 929. Anything when you're dealing with Schubert in the 9s or the 8s and the 9s means you're dealing with the last couple years of his life with those late masterpieces that were just extraordinary. I mean, this is 929, and 960, for example, is the last piano sonata, the great piano sonata in B flat. There are so many masterpieces from Schubert's last period. But these two trios are also big works, big, serious works. And they are simply wonderful, especially if you like late Schubert, if you like the string quintet, if you like the late quartets, if you like Death and the Maiden or Rosamunde, if you like those works, you're going to adore his piano trios. And this is, let's see, who is it? The Beaux-Arts Trio, doing the two piano trios. And it comes on this Philips twofer, which probably doesn't exist anymore. Hopefully it does. With the Grumio Trio doing his string trios, of which there are quite a few. And as usual with Schubert, there are, fragments and bits and things he didn't finish and stuff that may or may not show up on the disc. But essentially with Schubert, you've got two great piano trios that are vintage works. And they deserve to be very, very well known by record collectors. Those of you, if you love Schubert, you will want to hear his two piano trios. Enough said of Schubert, right? I mean, really just wonderful, wonderful music. After Schubert comes Mendelssohn. Now, Mendelssohn wrote two piano trios, the first of which in D minor is markedly more popular than the second. This does not mean that it's necessarily superior. They are both terrific pieces. They really, really are. But as is often the case in these circumstances, with a composer, people can only be bothered to deal with like one. And Mendelssohn's chamber music generally is so, so underrated. He was one of the all-time great composers of chamber music, and certainly one of the greatest in the 19th century. And he wrote everything. He wrote quartets, he wrote string quintets, he wrote piano trios, he wrote piano quartets, he wrote great stuff. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. And this first trio, I have just the first trio here, but you can get them both, and don't worry, they're going to be lovely. This is a terrific disc. It's with the Janacek and Smetana quartets and the Suk trio. The Suk trio does the trio, which is delightful. The Suk trio consists of Jan Panenka, Josef Suk, and Josef Chuchro, the Czech cellist. Oh, they're just great. But you also get the octet here with the combined Janacek and Smetana quartets. And it's a hot performance of the octet. It's a super fun historical recording, but it's devastatingly beautiful. The D minor quartet is a big work. It's 28 minutes long. Again, it's as long as one of the symphonies. It's as rich expressively. It sounds totally Mendelssohnian. That is, with that sort of anxious, expressive anxiety, especially in minor keys, that permeates so much of his work. It's a delightful work, and I'll bet a lot of you don't know it. I mean, it just is the way it happens with Mendelssohn's chamber music generally. And the trio you're likely to find is this one, the D minor. Now, I have left out of this talk, and of course, by mentioning what I'm leaving out, I'm including it, so there's a little, it's a little silly. But I'm not talking about Schumann's three trios in the ideal list. And the reason simply is because Schumann's trios are even less well known than Mendelssohn's. And it's not that they're not good music. They are, but they're not as popular as Schumann's piano quintet or piano quartet. And so I think I'm going to leave them for another time because I owe Schumann a bunch of talks, really. I really do. And I'd like to spend a little time talking about his chamber music in greater depth at some point. And of course, if this is the year 3241, then I've already done them and you can go look for them. But if you're seeing this fresh in June 2022, they will be coming. So do not worry. There are also all kinds of piano trios by all kinds of lesser known composers of the era. But don't worry. This is just the basics for those of you starting out who want to fill out your collection and make sure you're like touching the main bases. And after that, once you've decided you're a piano trio maven, you can go crazy and collect all the French ones and all the other people who did that at the right time. So after Mendelssohn, we have to jump ahead a little bit to Brahms. Brahms wrote three magnificent piano trios. And they are wonderful. Brahms, it's interesting because he usually did things in pairs. And you can at least get to a power of two here by noting that the first piano trio actually exists in two versions, an original version and a revised version. And that's very unusual for Brahms. because Brahms, as you know, destroyed his sketches. He didn't like anything to survive. But here you really do have two versions of the first piano trio, the first piano trio, which is the biggest of the three, actually. And then you've got the second in C major and the third in C minor, which is actually a very, very compact, ferocious, and marvelous piece. It's only 20 minutes long. It has four really gnarly, punchy movements. They're not gnarly in terms of difficult to listen to. They're gnarly in terms of expressively intense, really, really intense and agitated. The C minor piano trio of Brahms, that's the one you start off with, and then work your way back. Number two is in C major. Number one is in B major. It's really, really a lovely work. It's an expansive work, a little bit loosely organized for Brahms, his first. But the third, whoa. And if you think that Brahms is one of those composers who didn't really evolve very much over his career, listen to the three piano trios, because there is a world of difference between the sort of easy, relaxed, melodically effulgent first trio and this tense, coiled, ferocious predator of a trio, the third trio in C minor. Now, this set is the Suk trio on Superphone. It's a wonderful set, but there are lots and lots and lots of sets of the Brahms trios, and a lot of them are really super. So you don't have to worry so much about performances at this point. Worry about repertoire. Go and listen to the music wherever you can find it. And then, maybe we'll talk about specific works or do some individual repertoire talks on the Brahms trios or some of these other groups of trios. But they are three absolutely fabulous works, and everybody should hear them. I love it here in the overflow room. What you don't see is that right over there is a bed. And so I can just toss everything on there when I'm done with it. It's so much fun. So after Brahms comes Dvorak. Now, Dvorak wrote 4 piano trios. Only 2 of them are really famous. The 2 earlier ones, and I have them here. There's the one in it's B-flat major, opus 21, and G minor, opus 26. Now, they are magnificent pieces. They're early chamber works of Dvorak, 2 of his most successful early chamber works, first class in every respect. And it's the only reason, let's put it this way, the only reason they don't get the attention that they deserve is because the other 2 are just overwhelmingly famous. There's the F minor trio, and then finally the last of them, which is the famous Dumky trio, the one that consists of 6 Dumky, Czech dances, Czech, Ukrainian, Polish dances of some kind. And they are so overwhelmingly popular. In fact, the Dumky is probably the most famous piano trio written after Beethoven's Archduke. That's it. If you had the Archduke and the Dumky, you would be like, that's your 19th century trio summary. They really are amazing works. Dvorak's chamber music is, like everything Dvorak wrote, terribly underrated as compared to Brahms's. It is every bit as good. Sometimes it's better. And these four piano trios constitute the most important and abundant contribution to the trio medium since Beethoven's. And, we ought to just say that and suck it up because they are magnificent. Now, you can usually get the F minor and the Dumky trio on one disc, as I've discussed recently. For example, that amazing Ondine recording, which is with, it was a Christian Tetzlaff and his folks doing it. But this is the trio Abegg, Abegg, a really fine group on the Tatchett label, and they've done all 4. Here they are. Normally I would probably choose a Czech group like the Suk trio or the Guarneri trio on Superphone, but here we have it. Let's do non-Czech music, Czech artists for Czech music, because it deserves to be played by everybody, and they do it just as well. And we can use the Czechs for the non-Czech music, like Brahms. That just appeals to me. It just turns conventional wisdom a little bit on its head. So the Dvorak trios are essential, fabulous, fabulous works. And these Tatchett recordings are stunningly recorded, amazingly played, and you got to have all 4 Dvorak trios. You must. You simply must. And listen to those early ones. You're not going to be sorry. I promise you. I promise. They're great. Okay, next. All right, Tchaikovsky. Now, Tchaikovsky, there's a weird convention in Russian music that when somebody dies, you write a big piano trio and dedicate it to them. That's what Tchaikovsky did with his piano trio, and it is absolutely fantastic. It consists of 2 huge movements, a big, enormous opening elegiac piece, pezzo elegiaco, that has many tempo transitions. It's very sorrowful. And then a big, huge, long theme and variations second movement with wild changes of tempo and expression. The whole piece lasts, in this performance, 47 minutes. It is as long as any of Tchaikovsky's symphonies. And this recording, oh yeah, this is Martha Argerich, Gideon Kremer, and Misha Maisky. And boy, did they go to town on this music. Whoa, baby. And it's coupled with the Shostakovich second trio, which we will talk about in a moment. So it's a wonderful way to get both works because the Shostakovich is just as essential. But the Tchaikovsky trio is arguably his greatest chamber work, his most important chamber work. And it's an extraordinary composition, and it belongs in every serious collection, especially if you like Tchaikovsky, who's not known as a composer of chamber works, basically. I mean, he wrote 3 quartets, he wrote the sextet, Souvenir de Florence. There's not a lot else. But this trio is a major effort and a major statement by any standard. So Tchaikovsky has to be on your list. Thank you. And after Tchaikovsky, as long as we're in Russia, there is Rachmaninoff. And here's Rachmaninoff with the Beaux-Arts trio. He wrote 2 trios dedicated to dead people. There's trio elegiac number 1 and trio elegiac number 2. Now, number 1 is a multi-section 1-movement piece that ends with a funeral march, à la Marcia funèbre. Oh, yeah. But the second is very similar to Tchaikovsky's. It's a big, huge, just gigantic thing with a big opening movement in moderate tempo. And then there's a variation movement that's like 19 minutes long. And then a third movement, sort of, that's an allegro that wraps the whole thing up. It's not exactly the same as Tchaikovsky's, but it's very, very close. And again, these are both the Tchaikovsky and the Rachmaninoff second and first are very expressive but dark works, sad works. It's fascinating how this medium was selected for the expression of these rather funereal sentiments, although the emotional range is huge. I mean, they're not just miserable. There's plenty of high-spirited stuff in both of them, or all 3 of them, in the Tchaikovsky and the Rachmaninoff. But they are, again, major, major statements by composers who did not compose a lot of chamber music. And you can see why Rachmaninoff, wrote a trio, because he was a pianist. So his chamber music was always going to have a piano in it. Tchaikovsky, a little bit less so. He did write 3 string quartets, after all. But by the same token, the trio medium gave them an instant fullness of tone and the ability to indulge also in extremes of virtuosity on the keyboard that they wouldn't have had otherwise. And so you can see the appeal that the trio medium had. It really is. I mean, the piano itself, because it can make a full mass of harmony, just like an orchestra can, because you've got 10 fingers that you can hit lots of keys with, as opposed to other instruments that can only play 1 note at a time, or 2 maybe. So, the piano is like an orchestra in small. And when you add a violin and a cello, you get these possibly very, very rich quasi-orchestral textures. And both of these composers, in their 3 trios, indulge in that possibility, while still retaining the intimacy of a personal lament on the death of a friend or whoever the dedicatee happened to be. So Tchaikovsky and Rachmaninoff, this is the Beaux-Arts trio, by the way, who play it very beautifully, as they do everything. I mean, you could just get the big Beaux-Arts trio box, get every piano trio known to mankind if you want, but This is terrific. That goes there. Bang. And now we come back to Shostakovich. Now, Shostakovich wrote 2 trios. There is a very brief one-movement trio number 1. It's his opus 8 in C minor. Then there's trio number 2, his opus 67 in E minor, which is one of his very, very greatest works. It is a tragic, colossal, extraordinary piece of music, especially its finale, which is in Shostakovich's Jewish style. It's a Jewish type dance that rises to an unbelievable paroxysm of fury before the opening theme of the whole trio returns on the muted violin and cello, and it's just unbearably sad. It's incredibly beautiful as well, until the whole thing subsides into silence. Now, the Shostakovich Second Trio has gotten a lot of play in the past couple of decades. All the major trios have discovered it and recorded it, and most of them have done a splendid job, as long as you nail that finale and really go crazy. It has to sob and wail. I mean, it's a serious lament, but a powerful one. In dance terms, it's extraordinary. It's just extraordinary. It has so much richness of intensity in so many different ways. It's bitter, it's ironic, it's tragic. It's all of those things at once. It's just an incredible piece of music. And this is Trio Wanderer on Harmonia Mundi, and they do it absolutely superbly. And it's wonderfully coupled with Copland's Trio Vitebsk, the Vitebsk, which is an etude on a Jewish tune for piano trio, or a study on a Jewish theme. It's about 13 minutes long, a single movement. It's a wonderful coupling. And this is just a great disc. This one I wholeheartedly recommend. Whatever the others are all good. They're all wonderful. They're all worth acquiring. But if I were to do like a repertoire talk just on the Shostakovich Second Trio, this one would be at or near the top. No question about it. So it's Trio Wanderer on Harmonia Mundi. Marvelous. Shostakovich Second Trio. Essential. And last but not least, here is a set of piano trios that most of you probably won't know. Most people don't know them. Most people don't know they exist, but there are 3 by Martinu. And Martinu is another one of those composers whose work is so grossly underestimated simply because most people don't know it very well. But Martinu wrote 3 piano trios, and they are wonderful, vintage Martinuvian works. They sound terrific. The first one is actually called 5 pièces brèves, 5 little pieces. It's a suite from 1930, from his sort of neoclassical period. But the other 2 are from 1950 and 1951. That means they're some of his very latest chamber works. And they're in that wonderful, rich, mature style of the symphonies and the parables and the frescoes of Piero della Francesca, and all of those marvelous pieces that people who first come to know Martinu usually hear right away, and which gets them turned on. And these trios will get you turned on too. Now this is Trio des Iscles, or Trio de Isles, or Iscles. I should always have an artist whose name I can't pronounce. It just wouldn't be a Dave video without me screwing up the name of somebody. So here they are. See that? You can write it down yourself. That's who they are. And they are absolutely wonderful. And they are on Disc Concord or Grave or something, or Grave. I don't know what the heck this label is. It doesn't matter. The performances are wonderful. And Martinu is one of those composers who you really ought to know. As a great 20th century contributor to chamber music, all kinds of chamber music. He wrote beautiful string quartets. He wrote piano quartets. He wrote all the major chamber music media. Martinu made a contribution, and most of the time it was a very significant contribution. So that, my friends, whip that up there, is your ideal list of piano trios. That's what they are. Yes. Piano trios, a repertoire list. Those are all wonderful performances that I've mentioned, but I like I said, the important thing is not to go around making yourself crazy hunting for recordings. It's to just get to know the music. And just to summarize off the top of my head, let's see if I get all 10 composers. Ready? We started with Mozart, Beethoven, Schubert, Mendelssohn, Brahms, Dvorak, Tchaikovsky, Rachmaninoff, Shostakovich, and Martinu. Ha! 10. And if you get these, you're going to have a wonderful collection of piano trios that really will give you an excellent sense of the potential of the medium. And of course, like I said, there are millions more. They were being written by the SCAD in the 19th century anyway, less so in the 20th century. But I think that this is a good start. And I hope that you will agree and just go forth and listen and enjoy these as much as I do. So keep on listening, friends. Thank you so much for joining me. Take care.